Hello and welcome to another episode of Sermon Braindump. My name is Scott Dalen. I'm an ELCA pastor in Southwest Iowa, and I present these videos every week for a couple different reasons. The first of which is just to move my brain out of the mode of background work over the course of the week as I'm just kind of working with the text, and then move into the process of actually writing and preparing the sermon that I will preach to my congregation for the weekend. That's the first reason that I do these. Excuse me. And the second reason that I do them is just to allow you, the viewer, who have stumbled across this video for whatever reason, whether you are a regular subscriber, and if you are, hey, cool. And if not, hey, if you like it, hit subscribe. Cool. But just to allow you to gain some different insight into the assigned gospel text for the week. So that's kind of why I do these. This particular Sunday, which is September 5th, 2016, I have to look at my calendar there, and is the 19th Sunday after Pentecost. Our assigned gospel text for this week is Luke chapter 16, verses 19 through 31. Interesting little parable here. Actually, not little, it's a fairly lengthy parable. That is a little bit, it's got some interesting qualities to it that we don't oftentimes see with parables. One, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of lead up as to why exactly Jesus shares this parable or what he's dealing with. Although if we look at the overarching context of what else is going on in chapter 16, Jesus has been interacting with some people. There's been some other teachings about wealth. Actually, last week, if you happen to catch that video, we had the parable of the unrighteous steward, or the unfaithful steward, and that we cannot serve God in wealth. That was what we had a week ago. So that's been going on. That's also part of chapter 16. Then there's actually a little bit of narrative between that parable and the beginning of this one that talks about Jesus is still interacting with the Pharisees, who are the lovers of money, and kind of that's all going on. But what's interesting is he's talking to his he seems to be talking to his disciples, although I could be wrong about that. It seems like that's in my head, but I could be wrong. But so this interaction's been going on, and it seems to be that the focal point of this particular chapter is Jesus' teachings about the dangers of money, the dangers of wealth. And not to say that wealth and money is a bad thing, because it's not, but it's how do we use it? How do we use our abundance to serve others? That's always kind of the question to keep in mind when we encounter text like this. So, kind of all that being said, how about we dive in? Again, this is Luke 16 verses 19 through 31, and this is the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, if you're familiar with it. So here we go. There was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen, who feasted sumptuously every day. And at his gate lay a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, who longed to satisfy his hunger with what fell from the rich man's table. Even the dogs would come and lick his sores. Okay, so that's kind of the setup of the parable. We've got these two guys. We've got a rich guy, and the little hint about him dressing in purple and fine linen speaks to the notion of high status. Only the very elite dressed in purple at the time, simply because the dye needed to create purple was extremely expensive and was very limited, and so apparently there were Roman classifications about who could actually even get it. So whoever this rich guy is, he's very, very prominent, and he lives every day as if it is a celebration. So he has an abundance. And then juxtaposed to that, that's a big fancy word I never use very much, but opposed to that, at his gate, so outside his home or outside his community or whatever, there's this man named Lazarus who's poor, and not only that, but he's diseased, making him unclean, and he's got sores all over his body, and dogs, which are unclean animals, which I just learned this week, are come and lick his sores, adding to the uncleanness. So he's definitely cast outside of acceptable culture, society, whatever you want to say. But what's interesting about this is the rich man is not named, and Lazarus is. Now, antiquity kind of gives us a name for the rich man, or tradition does, but it's basically derived from I think Hebrew, might be Greek, but word for rich, which is actually very close to diva, which I think is kind of funny. But that's just a side note. But Lazarus is named, and this is the only parable throughout all of the Gospels when someone in a parable is named. And I think that's significant. I'll come back to it, but I think that's very significant. And ironically, his name means God has helped, or God helps. That's what Lazarus means. Now, side note again, this is not to be confused with Lazarus from John's Gospel, who Jesus raises from the dead. That was an actual guy. This is a parable. So just note that. Okay, let's continue. The poor man died and was carried away by the angels to be with Abraham. The rich man also died and was buried. In Hades, where he was being tormented, he looked up and saw Abraham far away with Lazarus by his side. He called out, "Father Abraham, have mercy on me and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in agony in these flames." But Abraham said, "Child, remember that during your lifetime you received your good things, and Lazarus in like manner evil things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in agony. Besides all this, between you and us a great chasm has been fixed, so that those who might want to pass from here to you cannot do so, and no one can cross from there to us." He said, "Then, Father, I beg you to send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, that he may warn them, so that they will not come into this place of torment." Abraham replied, "They have Moses and the prophets. They should listen to them." He said, "No, Father Abraham, but if someone goes to them from the dead, they will repent." He said to them, "If they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead." All right, so that's the rest of the parable. So within it, we've got this rich guy and we've got this poor diseased guy, Lazarus, living their lives. And Lazarus just desires, to even have the food that falls from the table of the rich guy, and yet he's got a rough life. The rich guy's got a great life, but then they both die. And there's a little bit of translation stuff going on here that doesn't quite indicate the joy of of what goes on with Lazarus. So Lazarus is carried by the angels to Abraham, and it's actually to the bosom of Abraham. So like to the breast of Abraham. So with sometimes we think of that as in the heart of Abraham. He's in his heart, or in the very least, he's right here. Just think of a mother nursing her child and how close they are. And that's the situation now of Lazarus with Abraham. Now, there's only one other time in Scripture when we see this type of description, and that's in John's Gospel at the Last Supper. The beloved disciple is laying at the bosom of Jesus. So when they're reclining at the table, the beloved disciple, whichever one that is lying right back against the heart of Jesus, against his chest. So, and the same type of thing. And it's translated that he's at Abraham's side, or he's with Abraham. And it really kind of cuts into the intimacy that we see here within the afterlife of the joy now that he is in the heart of the one who is faithful, the one who is the basis of the covenant that all of this started from. And then the vice versa, the rich guy is in Hades. Now, Hades is an interesting situation. Hades, this is kind of the beginning of the notion that we have of hell. Gehenna is another word that's related to that. And of course, we do hear that he's tormented in the flames. So what exactly is going on there, we don't know. But Hades is the place where dead people are, the place where dead people go. That's the notion. We might think of it as like purgatory if we come at it from a Catholic perspective, but that's not exactly accurate. It's basically just the place where dead people are. When we think about the Apostles' Creed, the original language, we say now that Jesus died and he descended to hell, but he descended to the dead. He descended to Hades. He descended to the place where dead people are. And so what exactly that is, I don't know. And I don't think that this parable is intended to be like foresight into the afterlife, of what the afterlife is going to look like. And I also don't think that just because the rich guy is rich, he goes to hell, and just because the poor guy is poor, he goes to heaven. I think what is really going on here is that, or the notion that I'm really kind of sticking to. I mean, there's a whole lot more that I could talk about with this parable. There's a lot going on here, but the important notion And kind of what I keep coming back to, and I think where I'm going with the sermon is, again, Lazarus is named. He is known. His identity is known. And this is the only character within a parable where that is the case. So what does that mean? He is known. Well, who's he known by? And that's perhaps the big question. Now we hear Abraham seems to be the I don't know, the keeper of paradise, which is kind of a weird thing to think of. I remember thinking about this one time before, and perhaps for Jewish people at that time, whose scriptures were limited to what we call the Old Testament, Abraham would be considered like we think of St. Peter at the pearly gates, as he's the guardian of heaven. So maybe that's where this notion comes from, but he's in paradise, and there's this chasm, this division between them and the torment of Hades. So, and again, whatever that means. And I'm drawn to this notion that death is a chasm, and we see that in life, that death creates this barrier between those of us who are alive and those who have died that we cannot cross. And that's an important to note. And I'm going to say this real quick. I'm already kind of looking at time here, but in the end, the rich man who's hoping to be relieved of his torment can't be. And Abraham tells him that. So he says, "Well, send Lazarus to tell my brothers so they'll repent." And Abraham basically says, "Well, they have Moses and they have the law and the prophets. If they don't listen to that, they're not going to listen. Even if someone raises from the dead, hey, foreshadowing Jesus." Woo, but the notion that that chasm exists in death, but here in life, the message of the law and the prophets, of the gospel, it still needs to be shared. There is still that chance to hear and find faith, or for faith to work within our hearts, the Spirit to work within us, before death happens. So whereas Lazarus cannot be sent back from the dead because it won't matter, apparently, we who are still living are invited to share the gospel, are invited into the work of reconciliation, because those who have not bridged that gap or have not crossed that chasm still are called, or still can hear it. And that came out kind of muddled, but I hope you kind of see where I'm going with that there's that distinction. But long story short, where I'm going with it is to be known, and to be identified, to be known by God, to be known, to be in the bosom of or to be at the heart of those who know us, who know us intimately, who know us better than we know ourselves. That's where life is found. Life is found in the heart of God, in being known by God. So if you have thoughts, questions, comments based on this, by all means, share those down in the comment section. We can continue the conversation that way. Otherwise, I hope you have a great week, and God bless.